welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. Also below this video there is a link to get £50 back for swapping your UK electricity supplier to Octopus Energy. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcomed back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel. So please share the show on Facebook and Twitter. One last time, if you're new to the channel or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe. Hit the bell notification icon and join button to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now, we are joined by Brian's Logic, 10th Man, Arwin, Neil, and a whole bunch of people in Discord. So welcome one and all.
Good morning.
Good afternoon.
Hello from Discord. Can we get a hello from anybody?
Hello, everyone.
Hello, George. Thank you very much. Much obliged.
Good job, George.
Also, quick shout out to Pugsley Lovejoy. He's just joined as a member. Joined as a hyena. Wow. Good stuff. Thank you very much for joining as a channel member. Although it is actually public chat today, so anyone can chat. You don't have to be a member to chat today. But I really appreciate you joining all the same, Pugsley. Really appreciate it. Any evidence of a physical geometric sphere edge? That would be a horizon, formerly known as Earth curvature.
Nonsense.
Pictures from space.
Get that nipped in the bud. Any evidence that you can have gas pressure without the necessary antecedent of a container for all the fundies who believe that space is a place you can take pictures from, i.e. proof the sky can be a vacuum without us having containment of the gas pressure we actually breathe?
Gravity.
They just went to Mars.
Darwin's on a roll. Sorry, whoever that
was.
was. Sorry, 10th. Sorry. Any scientific evidence of gravity?
Math is reality.
Sorry, any science, not math, any scientific evidence of gravity? Arwin.
No.
That was dealt with nicely. Any single viable hypothesis from any of the fields of astronomy, cosmology, or astrophysics?
Not yet.
They're on the way.
They're on the way. How long have they been in existence as a discipline? On the
It's
way.
hard to know.
These people use the word science quite a lot, though, don't they?
Yeah,
It's a convenient word to use because, you know, when you use science, everyone already believes and trusts that all the testing has been done, the experiments have been done, and it's a valid thing now. That's how far away they've gotten from true science.
Well, in one of your chats, Nathan, somebody told me that moon phase is a science.
Well, no, it's a phenomenon like anything they look at in the sky. You know, they've got a claimed cause of that effect that we observe, but that's definitely not an adherence to the scientific method. That's why we ask for valid hypotheses. If they've got one, we'd like it. You know, yeah, they can see lights doing things. That's phenomena. Well, that's step one. Observe natural phenomena. Then establish what you think is the cause. Then vary it to see if it causes it. That's science. Yeah, well, we don't even need that. We just need the hypothesis bit. And they haven't got it.
I agree.
Just so stories only.
I agree.
Yeah.
He went back and forth with me. First, he said some people haven't gone to school. And then he goes, because I said, well, it's not science. Moon phases are not science. He goes, you prove my point.
We've been swindled with just so stories claimed to be science, and they're defined accurately as pseudoscience when claimed to be science with no adherence to the scientific method. That's what pseudoscience is, and that's what our former here worldview was based on. Pseudoscience, just so stories claim to be science when there's no adherence to the scientific method, there's no empiricism, they're just stories.
Well, they're not going to get very far if they start off with the pre-assumption that it's a shadow on the moon. They haven't verified it's a shadow. All they can see is a darkening. That's all they can see.
Right, when it comes
Why?
to eclipses, at least, yes. Another phenomena that they claim to have the cause of. That effect. Based on their models and heliocentrism. That's it. It's just a story based on a philosophy that gives you a cause and effect relationship. Well, cause and effect relationship is validated by science.
But it
Experimentation,
can't be
right? Go on.
it can't be the shadow, Brian, because in the pictures we've seen before, if they're saying the Earth is causing the shadows on the wrong side of the moon when it is, so that can't be it.
Well, then what causes the moon phases?
I
Who
don't know.
knows? Who
What?
cares?
I don't know, Neil. That's the honest answer.
What is the moon?
We don't know.
No, well, I don't know. Maybe somebody knows. Maybe the people who've lied to us about it being a heliocentric description of what the moon does. Maybe we should go and appeal to them. Please tell us you lied. Please tell us the truth now. And they'll rattle off a new story.
It's no guarantee that people that know they are liars actually know the truth.
Exactly.
Yeah, but see,
They might not know any more than we know.
But then we look bad because the heliocentric model has an answer for moon phases. We don't have anything.
Well,
don't need
they
to.
don't have an answer for, let's just say, well, they have an explanation for different things. But as it always starts with pre-assumptions of a radius. But they don't have an answer for why the moon disappears.
But
Think
it
of it
works.
like an alibi. If you're providing an alibi for where you are, and the prosecutor's saying, well, who did it then? You go, I don't know, I wasn't there. I don't have to provide a story for what actually happened if I'm nothing to do with the story. I can point out how I'm not involved. That's my alibi, and that's all I know. Do I need to come up with a plausible story for how the events I had nothing to do with took place? Well, no. Do I have to come up with, as a flat earther, a plausible story for what the sun is, for example? Any evidence of the distance to the sun? The answer is no. There's a story out there, though, and we can pull that to pieces in front of the people who punt it. No? Distance to the sun? I'll shout out Retro Bill if no one's going to go. Shout
It's
out to
over
Retro
there.
Bill. Go on, whoever it was.
It's over there.
Epic. Shout out to Retro Bill. It says, good morning, guys. Shout out to 10th Man for his recent presentations. Excellent work. Thank you very much indeed for the super chat, Retro Bill. And indeed they are. Check out the Uncut and After Show, where over the last week or so, 10th Man has been doing presentations on the sextant and how it proves the Earth is flat, which it absolutely does. So check them out. They're on my second channel daily. They go out at 9 PM UK time, which is 3 PM Central, something like that.
I agree. 10th Man is ace.
10th Man is ace. Distance to the sun? Anybody at all?
I'm also a joker at times.
Joker? What?
He says, you said I'm ace, and I said I'm also a joker at
Oh,
times.
deck of
Boom,
cards.
boom! Unfortunately, I'll give this disclaimer. There aren't too many puns in his presentations, if any. Just so you know.
Oh, thank God.
Sorry to diminish the presentation.
More's the pity.
Oh, by the way, Nathan, you probably did see the Nathan vs. Rumpus rap, right?
I played it on the pre-show.
Ah, okay.
We just played the Curse Fest.
It's
Nobody
off.
liked it.
Yeah, we can bypass it.
Quick shout out to Godzilla37. It says, Globus defending the globe model and children defending Santa. Hard to see a difference. I totally agree. It's the same principle.
The best part of that song was when Rumpus cursed. Get angry, Rumpus, get angry.
Because balls.
Because
No
balls.
distance
That's
to
why.
the sun, Nathan.
Go on, Neil. 10th.
No distance to the sun has been.
What about a self-perpetuating molten iron core at the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth?
Roche, baby. Roche.
Ferrero Rocher.
Where does
This,
it melt exactly?
What doesn't what
they
melt?
don't even. They can't even prove the radius of this presupposed Earth, let alone that.
Speaking of radius, any evidence of the R value?
The molten iron core, that doesn't exist.
Sounds a bit circular.
Black core?
You caught it.
Black.
I just Googled distance to the sun. It says 91.82 million miles away. So I don't know what you're talking about. The answer is right there in Google.
It's based on an R value that's derived from Venus having the same assumed R value as an Earth assumed to be spherical, and the assumption leading Al-Biruni to measure a dip angle to a claim to be physical tangent point on a sphere we formerly called Earth curvature. It's just the horizon, non-physical. So they don't have a way of deriving the R to impose it on a presupposed spherical Earth and then superimpose that presupposition onto Venus so that they can apply Kepler's third law of interplanetary motion and derive all the scaling values to give them distances. That's where you get your 93 million miles from. 93 or 9? You said 91.2.
That's what it says.
91
Yeah,
then.
it's constantly
Whatever they
changing,
make
you
up.
know? But is there even a persistent supposed distance to the sun?
Well, it's
I thought
variable,
that
it's scalable.
The Earth was supposed to be wobbling around the sun in an ellipsoid.
Yeah, that's part of the mathematics, but the point is that it's scalable. You can scale it up, you can scale it down, depending on the assumptions that you make. You could push the stars out further and make them bigger. You know, you could just make something that's presumed to be a certain size a bit smaller because it's a bit further away but a bit bigger in the maths, if that makes sense. So you can push the distance out and the size up, depending on how you scale it. Well, you've got to pick a particular value to scale it with in the first instance if you don't know the size of any of the objects you're scaling, and they don't. So they just say, well, Venus is the same size as Earth. It's Earth's twin. Why? Well, because Christian Huygens says it was. That's it.
Yeah, let me read this real quick. The sun is at an average distance of about 93 million miles away. So we're at an average.
I see. Yeah, because of the elliptical orbit, whoever mentioned that earlier, that's why we get 91 million, presumably in there. Let me get this correct. Closer. Well, that would be winter then, wouldn't it, if the sun's closer, right?
No?
Yeah. Really? I think you'll find
Well,
in
they
their
used to
nonsense
say you
backwards
had-
world of heliocentrism, the sun's closer in winter.
Yes, because it has to heat the Earth up because it's colder during winter.
Obviously.
What orbit?
No, but that's not correct. It's like in the summer and the winter, it's actually further away. Right?
For the Australians, on their model, for us,
It can't
it's
be the same
claimed
for
that the
everybody on the
sun
ball.
it's claimed that the sun is at its closest during winter. For us.
Really?
Yeah. It's nuts, isn't it?
Okay. Whatever. Doesn't make any damn sense anyway.
But it can't
What-
be.
what
It makes
orbit?
no
The other way
sense
around.
because it can't be the same for everybody on a ball.
I mean,
Makes no sense.
you're going to have to expand on that a bit. We all know it doesn't make sense. We're here making a show about flat Earth and how it's not a sphere, but what doesn't make sense specifically? And how doesn't it? What are you talking about?
Well, it could be closer during the winter. What did you say? Further away during the winter in Australia?
Let's forget about Australia. For us, in winter, right, based on the
Right.
tilt and the elliptical motion of Earth around the sun in the heliocentric model, we are at our closest point to the sun, i.e. we are closest to it in winter.
Yeah, and I was told because it's cold and the sun has to work harder, so it's closer.
What? Who told you that? It has to work
That's what
harder.
we were
What?
taught in school. It's closer winter because it's cold and it's it's got to heat the Earth up. Otherwise, it'd be another ice age. Come on, it makes perfect sense.
What?
It doesn't matter
No,
if it makes
the
sense or
idea
not.
is that the actual distance to the sun has not as much influence as how much direct exposure during the daytime the Earth's surface in that region has of the sun.
Exactly.
But
We're
it's
on a
really weird because I thought that in the elliptical orbit around the supposed sun, the Earth gets closest during spring and fall, which would be simultaneous, both, right? That is when it gets the closest to the sun. Then when it moves away, that's when the summer and winter happen.
in their model. with a
Or is it the other way
66.6
around?
degree tilt off horizontal. So that's what they're claiming the seasons are caused by.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it still has a paradoxical position where you're closest to this huge body at a grass distance. You're closest to it in winter. It just doesn't make any sense. But they've got a different description. They've got us tilted. Anyway, who cares?
No, but
Just a model.
why it's supposed to make sense is because during the day there's less, the surface is less subjected to the direct sunlight, and that seems to be the primary cause of the heating and the dying down of the heat. It's just the exposure, not so much the supposed distance to the sun.
Right, but you got the right word in there eventually. The cause. So they've got a cause and effect relationship being asserted. All right. Well, that sounds very much within the remit of science, doesn't it? Cause and effect. That is what science is. Dealing with cause and effect. Well, they've got a just so story to describe an effect we experience, in this case, the seasons.
Right. But that was the only part about it that made sense to me.
None of it makes sense. On a ball, flying through space, sun at the centre, it's all nonsense.
Hey, as a baller, there's a lot of things that can make sense. But it didn't make sense to me that there is a change of the distance, the literal distance to the sun during the cycle around it. That part just didn't make any sense to me because the sun doesn't change angular size, even apparently. Now, it's always the same size. It doesn't get bigger during certain seasons and smaller. So, anyway, no evidence.
For what? What were we asking? Was that the last housekeeping question?
Distance to the sun, remember?
Distance to the sun. I think that's it. I think that concludes housekeeping.
What about gas pressure out of container?
I did ask. It was the second question because Arwin said pictures from space.
Yes. And then we moved on to gravity.
Exactly. I think we've covered them all. That was it. That concludes housekeeping.
Okay, great.
That was quick.
That was thanks to you, it being quick, because you rattled through the logical progression a baller tends to take when you say, well, any evidence of Earth curve, moving on to, we didn't cover axial rotation. Any evidence of axial rotation of the Earth-based variety?
Lockstep motion and the retaining of angular momentum.
Where's Neil? Where's Brian?
There's an axis.
YouTube wants us to talk about their claimed deviation when travelling north and south, Brian. He's like, cover that more. I'm like, okay, you're talking about globiolus, fine. Well, I thought to myself when he said it in chat yesterday, when Brian's next on, I'm certain you're more than keen to talk about globiolus all day.
Well, according to them, if you left the equator on an airplane and flew north to 30 degrees north, let's just say, that the Earth will be rotating slower underneath you because you're maintaining the angular momentum. You're conserving the angular momentum of the equator, which is measured by them in miles per hour, which is based on the distance around their mathematical model of an oblate spheroid at the equator, which is 24,900 miles or plus or whatever. So you're traveling supposedly 1,040 miles. You're conserving a momentum speed of 1,000, an angular momentum speed of the linear speed of 1,040 miles per hour. And then because you're moving away from the equator, north or south, you then are moving faster than the rotation of the globe Earth underneath you.
It's okay, I'll leave you a little bit more. So this is very much a description of what's happening in actuality to a projectile, correct?
Yeah, this is what they describe as happening to a projectile. Or anything that's moving north or south away from the equator. Or south to the equator, or north to the equator, or south to the equator. You know, basically that anything moving over the Earth retains the angular momentum of the place it left. So if you leave at the 60 degrees north on an airplane, you're retaining that angular momentum speed at that distance around the Earth in the globe model at that particular point. So when you move south, then the globe will be moving faster than you, and the further south you go, the faster than you will go. So you will be making an actual deviation, or the projectile will be making an actual deviation. It's kind of funny because their claim would mean that we would actually see a deviation of something in the sky as well, but I don't know how they're measuring the conservation of angular momentum in miles per hour. That's a bit, besides everything else, that's a bit of a tongue twister or a mind twister, but they have to do it. They have no choice, because it was pointed out back in the 70s or 80s that we don't see the Coriolis effect. We don't see apparent deviation. So they had to point out, so this was pointed out, so they had to change it. So they changed it to the conservation of angular momentum being measured in linear miles per hour momentum, which is non-existence.
Right.
So,
And then threw in some confusion by having things like the Met Office describing Coriolis as an actual effect with actual deviation in winds, and convolute the description of what Coriolis effect is when you go through all the descriptions. If you just search it in Google and take the first 10 descriptions, they'll all have contradictions in them. There's like one that I could direct the audience to that accurately describes it, which is Wiki, but there's 5 paragraphs or 6 paragraphs of double speak contradiction. But on the right hand side of Wiki, there's an actual GIF with a 2-sentence description of things seeming to curve as you rotate underneath them on a non-inertial reference frame, with a depiction of 2 circles, one showing the view looking down on the circle turning, and that's showing a ball moving straight because you're not turning, so the ball just moves straight, and then another depiction of the roundabout with you attached to it watching the ball seem to curve because you're turning underneath it, i.e. a very concise description of Coriolis. But if you can throw into the mix totally convoluted, contradictory descriptions throughout every Google search for Coriolis effect, also link a lot of those descriptions to what Earth specifically is claimed to be doing, rather than just detailing how the effect takes place, you can end up with 5 confusing paragraphs in Wiki to throw people off the scent. And it worked. It worked with me when I first looked into it, when I first came to this subject. I just want to read out YouTube's comment, Brian, just because he was the one who actually spurred you into this conversation, because he suggested to me that I cover this today. That's part of why FE isn't going away. No one that believes Earth is a globe is coming up with anything to change anyone's mind. Just stupid stuff like it's a globe or it's not flat. Exactly. That was kind of my sentiment, Ute, to the Rumpus recently, when it's like, well, you don't have anything new. After 4 years, there's nothing you have that's new. There's nothing you have to offer anymore that's interesting, because we've heard it all before. None of it's convincing. None of it's changing the story. None of it's overcoming the debunkings. So it's like, well, that's why we're still here, because nobody's convinced us otherwise. I personally, the rest of the panel, you can all speak to this in a second. Feel free on Discord also. I've given up on that. I've completely relinquished all hope that there's ever going to be anybody showing me it as a sphere. It's demonstrably not. And there's no getting away from that. So it's not like I live in hope that somebody's eventually going to come and show me that it actually is a sphere. I was wrong all along. That's not going to happen. Everything that's going on in terms of the functionality of the ground beneath our feet, they're dealing with it flat, because it is. So where do I go? Do I sit in here thinking, oh, one day maybe someone will come and prove the sphere to me? No. But they still come and try, but they just don't have anything any good. So right on, Ute.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I say. It's the first thing I say in 24/7 or somewhere else. I say, listen, we all know what you're going to tell us. We've all learned the same thing. Have you got anything new? Are you going to debunk any of the housekeeping questions? It's the same old stuff. But with Coriolis, if we stick to the optical, that it is an optical effect, we won't get caught up in all of that convoluted nonsense.
Well said.
They had,
Go on,
sorry,
Brian.
I just said it's something that's important for people to understand, that they changed the Coriolis effect as a term. They gradually changed it to calling it a pseudo force, but then they're doing it more and more often, just calling it the Coriolis force, because in their globeolus there is an actual deviation. So this actual deviation that is of the projectile or airplane or whatever in their globeolus is like a pseudo force, or maybe they're trying to make it into an actual force. When It was only changed. The word effect was only changed because they couldn't show the effect. They have to claim it as some kind of a pseudo force and now a force. There is no effect, observable effect. You know, so they're gone into talking about a force and never talking about it as an effect because they can't show it. If you understand what I mean.
Yeah. Neil broke it down perfectly. It's like, it's a not actual effect. And Neil described this about 6 months ago, and he's like, I went on a roundabout in my car, looked up at a plane, and from my perspective going around the roundabout, it looked like the plane turned around. Well, yeah, that's it seeming to drift because you're turning underneath it. That's Coriolis effect. Well, the pseudo bit, the not actual bit, the apparent bit, is from Neil's perspective, in his car, looking up at the aeroplane. There's no doubt about it. It's changing direction. Yeah? It's going one way in your windscreen, and then as you go around the roundabout, you have to look out the back rear window to actually see the plane in its direction that you were watching it. So it's literally doing it. It's apparent, meaning you see it happen. But the plane hasn't turned around. You're turning underneath it. It's an apparent effect. Yeah? And it's caused because you're turning underneath it. Well, it's claimed Earth has that effect. You turn underneath stuff, like a plane, just like with Neil's roundabout example, and you look up at it and go, look, it looks like it's curving off course. And then the guy nudges you and go, no. What that actually is Earth turns underneath the plane to cause it to look like it's curving off course. It's just going to be travelling straight. It's us turning underneath the plane. Like Neil turning underneath the plane on a roundabout, making it much more severe. But Earth's supposed to turn underneath stuff. That is Coriolis, an optical effect. In other words, you see it happening. You don't account for it in a projectile, because in this example with the plane and roundabout example, does the guy in the plane get a quick radio call? Ground control, come in. Well, there is a man beneath you turning on a roundabout, and from his perspective, it looks like you're turning around in the air. Please account for this not actual deflection immediately. No. The plane is never going to concern itself, with Neil watching it look like it's turning around. But it definitely still looks like it's turning around to Neil when he goes underneath it in a circle. You turning beneath stuff to cause a not actual drift. That's Coriolis. Well, the reason Earth is claimed to have this effect is because it's claimed to turn underneath stuff. The problem, as detailed by Brian, that doesn't happen! You'd notice! So, to get around that little detail that it would happen, should happen, and is claimed to happen on a spinning Earth, Coriolis deviation, things seeming to drift as you turn underneath them. Well, because it doesn't, we get into a wrangle-dangle about what the projectile actually does, how it's curving as it moves north, and having to account for it. Well, that's not Coriolis effect. At all. It's not all to do with the projectile's actual journey, everything to do with it seeming to move because you turn underneath it. So they convolute it and turn it into an effect that the projectile's actually experiencing, and how much it's experiencing, or how little it would be experiencing it because of a justification for why it wouldn't experience this effect. All nonsense because they're detailing the projectile and its actual journey. Its path is irrelevant when you're detailing Coriolis because the Coriolis effect is a not actual deviation, seeming to drift but not actually.
The reason I highlighted the difference between where it used to be called the Coriolis effect and now they're trying to call it more and more the Coriolis force is because their cause starts with a supposed conservation of angular momentum. So that is a force, let's just say, that's causing the deviation of the projectile or airplane, the actual deviation of the projectile or airplane or whatever in their model and belief. So they had to change it from effect to force. They've had to change it because it's not an effect, because it's a force that's causing it. So they're calling it the Coriolis force, when it's not. It's a visual effect, but we don't observe it.
That's what I'm saying. We should see it everywhere then.
We're not
Exactly.
rotating.
We'd notice. Exactly. We'd see it happening. We don't, because it doesn't. So they justify why it doesn't, and often include a demonstration or detail a demonstration that has no drift, when it should drift. Doesn't, because it isn't. Earth isn't spinning. Earth is stationary. If it was turning, they'd have Coriolis. They claim they've got Coriolis. We don't experience Coriolis on a turning Earth because we're not turning.
Yeah, but they never learn, because Zanuck the other day was talking about Foucault's pendulum. So it's very frustrating at times, you know?
I love it when they bring up Foucault's
It
pendulum.
makes sense, but they go back to the old stuff.
No, I love it. That's one of my favourite things for them to do. Brilliant. Bring up Foucault's pendulum, because pendulums swing back and forth. That's what pendulums do. Before I go into this discussion about Foucault, I'll read out Retro Bill's super chat. This super chat is in honour of all those innocent bystanders who died from stray gunfire before snipers starting accounting for Coriolis. Yeah, right. A good segue, though, Retro Bill, because snipers is another example that ties them into their actual claim. Precisely. So, likewise, the Foucault pendulum ties them into their actual claim. Pendulums move back and forth. That is what pendulums do. It is inherent to their nature to just move back and forth in one direction. Now, when you look at a Foucault pendulum in a shopping mall, it's got all those dominoes around it in a circle, and it, over time, knocks the dominoes over. Well, obviously, it's swinging round and round then, isn't it? No. It's claimed Earth turns underneath the back and forth motion of the pendulum to cause it to appear to drift. So it's not because pendulums have a figure of 8 motion, as asserted by idiots like Rumpus. They don't. They just move back and forth. And then it is claimed that the deviation you are watching is caused by Earth turning underneath it at 15 degrees an hour. So you are observing a Coriolis effect in the pendulum, as you are claimed to turn beneath it. So it ties them into their claim. This is what you're claiming then. Earth turns under the pendulum to cause it to appear to drift at 15 degrees an hour. So Earth's turning underneath to give us Coriolis deflection at 15 degrees an hour then. Yes, you claim it's the proof of said 15 degrees an hour deviation. Then Earth's turning under aeroplanes at 15 degrees an hour. And they also would drift, seem to curve from the ground, not because they are. Pendulums don't move in a figure of 8, they move back and forth. Planes don't curve, they would just move in a straight path from A to B, but seem to if we were turning underneath them. The problem with that claim is if Earth's turning underneath a pendulum at 15 degrees an hour, and therefore turning underneath an aeroplane, football and sniper's bullet at 15 degrees an hour, it would shorten the flight time. All well and good us looking up at it and going, oh, it looks like it's curving, because Earth's moving underneath it, shortening its flight west. Charlotte, North Carolina to Los Angeles takes, in actuality, 4.5 hours. Now, if Earth was turning, as it is claimed, with a 15 degrees an hour deviation, you'd have an 1.5 hour flight time. Obviously not the case. Shout out to Multi Tom Tom, long time no see. Shout out to Nathan Oakley for sticking with FE all this time. Kudos, my man. There's a lot of longevity in this subject, Multi Tom Tom. Epic subject. And until the entire Western world change their general poisoned worldview that we are on a spinning ball flying through a sky vacuum, I'll still have a show. Good for me! And I really appreciate the support. Thank you very much indeed. There's no Coriolis effect. Earth's not turning underneath anything. If it was, it shortened flight times. And drones would whiz away from you at 1,000 miles an hour as they hovered on the equator. Not because they can fly at 1,000 miles an hour, but it's claimed that as it whizzes away from you, your guy next to you says, oh, it's not really flying 1,000 miles an hour, it's Earth turning underneath it. Obviously, that doesn't happen because we don't have any Coriolis effect.
Nathan, if everybody does come to a realization of flat Earth, you'll go from a debate show to a classroom, and you'll be a teacher.
I already see it that way. I already see that this way. This show is marked as education, Neil. That's absolutely how I see the show.
I agree.
Just for the audience who might be new to the subject, because most of the audience out there will know this, but there's new people listening all the time. Just add secondary points, not as important as what Nathan just said about the argument of if things are rotating underneath pendulums. If the outer side is rotating underneath the pendulum, then it's also rotating underneath an airplane, and it's not rotating underneath an airplane, so it's not rotating underneath pendulums. If the Earth was rotating, no pendulum for a start could stay stationary. It would constantly be moving, because no pendulum will stay stationary on a moving surface, number one. Number two, for anyone who is new to the subject, who wants to further look into this and is further confused, is a bit confused by it, all these places that have these pendulums, they either have electromagnetic motors that cause them to go in particular directions and do particular things, or they have somebody who makes sure that the pendulum keeps going and keeps going in the desired direction. And they will even stop the pendulum when it's going in the non-desired direction and force it to go to the desired direction. It's the biggest joke of a proof that I think the globe has. And it kills them because as soon as they bring it up, we don't even need to talk about all the other nonsense because they're claiming that the Earth is rotating underneath the pendulum. And then if it's rotating, as Nathan says, if it's rotating underneath the pendulum, then it's rotating underneath the airplane, and we'll have shorter flights going east to west. But we don't have that. So it's not rotating underneath the pendulum because it's not rotating at all.
Exactly. And it's a convoluted proof that they can argue all day about what you perceive to be their claim about it, and then discuss what we perceive to be their claim about the pendulum, rather than the overall implication that if Earth's turning under the pendulum to cause a 15 degrees an hour drift and knock over the dominoes, then Earth's turning underneath as a non-inertial spinning reference frame, and we'd experience Coriolis drift, as is asserted to be the case. It's just only asserted to be the case in things like footballs that are in the air for a couple of seconds, or sniper's bullets that you can't even see whiz through the air. Now, it's claimed that Earth turns underneath those things. So, in Neil deGrasse Tyson's example of a football making a goal, because Earth turned underneath it to cause it to seem to drift through the goal, well, that's Earth turning underneath the ball to cause that apparent drift. Well, the ball's travelling straight, it just seemed to drift a little bit because you were turning underneath it as it was in the air. The problem with the example Neil deGrasse Tyson makes is how many blimps have got Earth turning underneath them as they film field goals? Well, they're not. Earth's not turning underneath the blimp because it's not turning underneath the football, but it's asserted to turn underneath the football, and it's asserted to turn underneath the sniper's bullet. Well, they have to track the target because once the bullet leaves the barrel, it's going to have Earth turning underneath it, and the target's moving then. So you've got to lead the target so that you'll still hit it as Earth turns under the bullet. Well, that's a Coriolis deflection caused by Earth turning under the bullet according to their claim. That would shorten flight times. That would cause hot air balloons to land in a very different location as Earth turned underneath them. That would cause drones to whiz away at 1,000 miles an hour as they hovered on the equator. None of which happens. Anything that's in the air for a significant period of time does not appear to drift away as you turn underneath it.
Let me play baller here. Neil deGrasse Tyson's an idiot.
Neil deGrasse Tyson is merely asserting the holy priesthood's rhetoric in terms of what should happen. Earth is claimed to have Coriolis effect. Now, at the moment, at trench level, it's reliant on both sides not knowing really what Coriolis is. So that you can argue about what Coriolis is, not how, if Earth has Coriolis, that's non-inertial, spinning reference frame, turning beneath an inertial reference frame with an observation of a projectile seeming to drift because you're turning beneath it. And if Earth is turning beneath stuff, bullets, balls, whatever, then it would shorten flight times and drones would drift away 1,000 miles an hour on the equator. Let's argue all day about how we shouldn't see drones drifting away because we're turning underneath them to cause this not actual deviation. Obviously, drones can't fly at 1,000 miles an hour. They say, drones have got motors, powered flight, therefore no deviation. It's like, what do you mean? You're supposed to be fighting on the globe side that we have 15 degrees an hour drift as Earth turns underneath. It's called Coriolis. But you're going to spend 25 minutes to 3 hours on some occasions arguing about how we shouldn't see shortened flight times, how we shouldn't see drones drift away as we turn underneath them, Coriolis effect. That's what we get at trench level. So reliant entirely on people not knowing what Coriolis even is, because if they did, they'd understand implicitly that we've got to be turning beneath stuff to have the effect. So Earth's got to be turning beneath stuff to have the effect. And if we're turning beneath stuff, it shortens flight times.
Yeah, when they come in and claim that we shouldn't expect to see any evidence that the Earth is rotating and we shouldn't expect to see any evidence of a physical geometric horizon. And we shouldn't expect to see any evidence of of gas pressure, of a gas pressure gradient forming within a vacuum. All these kind of things. That's purely confirmation bias for them. They're telling themselves that. They're coming in here to audibly tell themselves, right, regardless what argument you put to them, they're telling themselves that there's no way I should have to expect to see this, because we wouldn't see this on the globe model.
Even though they would with Coriolis. So it's a cognitive dissonance thing. We've been saying these two words a lot recently, and there's good reason why. Because if you come into an arena and start your conversation by saying, Earth has 15 degrees an hour drift, so you'll sometimes see the comments, thanks Bob for proving 15 degrees an hour drift. Well, that's a claim that Earth turns underneath to cause not actual drift at 15 degrees an hour, Coriolis effect basically. But that same person will come in, we've had this recently, and they'll say, you drop a ball in a tower and it will land not directly below where you dropped it from, but off slightly. You go, okay, so what you're saying is Earth turns underneath the ball to cause it to not land directly beneath where you dropped it from. In other words, Coriolis effect. It seemed like, if you were watching the ball took a curved path and then didn't land in a straight line below where you dropped it from. It landed somewhere else because it curved away from its straight path. That's Coriolis effect. But that same person will tell you all about how you wouldn't expect to see that very effect in anything other than his very controlled man-made example, with 35 attempts to get it to do this, and then an assertion that Earth caused it to do it because it drifted. It's Earth turning underneath it. You get them to the point where they make their own claim, and then they'll tell you, we wouldn't expect to see drift. Or even ask us to prove why we're saying Earth's turning underneath stuff when we point out that it isn't. That's what we get at trench level. They'll deny the very claim they've came in to prove. Earth turns underneath stuff, Coriolis effect, we have deviation, 15 degrees an hour drift, watch my pendulum drift, watch my ball drift through the goal, watch my bullet need to have the target led. Well, that means you've got Earth turning underneath an aeroplane and it would drift away. Powered flight, powered flight. It's like, no, it's not a particular effect you observe from the ground. All we're talking about with Coriolis is you looking at the plane, seeming to drift because you're watching it as you turn underneath it. That's the claim. So to have that effect, as you claim you have it in bullets and balls, you'd have it in planes and helicopters and hot air balloons and drones. We just don't. And what that's the thing that would have the most effect. It's in the air the longest period.
Well, according to Rumpus, it sounds a bit sloppy when you say turn underneath.
Yeah, well, Coriolis effect is a non-inertial spinning reference frame turning beneath an inertial reference frame. But when we say Earth turning beneath an inertial reference frame, in other words, just substitute the description of Coriolis effect with the words non-inertial for Earth, they don't like it because it doesn't happen.
Maybe he should contact Mr. Smoking the Grass Tyson and let him know about that.
They'll just call him an idiot.
Well, go ahead. He's on your side.
Floppy.
You go ahead and call him an idiot.
The ball is throw him under the bus. You know that.
Yeah, but the thing about Neil deGrasse Tyson is he can say that the Earth rotates underneath a ball, and he'll get away with that because all he's doing is pumping out that message to people.
Nobody's ever going to challenge him.
Yeah,
I say we put pressure on him. I say we put pressure on him to debate this. Enough of this nonsense.
He's already said he won't.
I don't care.
Neil
Put
and
more
Chocolate, hold on a
pressure on
second. Just stop rumping
Call the
Brian.
scaredy cat.
Neil and
what I'm trying
Chocolate,
to say.
hello. Just let Brian get to the end of his point. Go ahead, Brian.
Thanks, Nathan. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. It's like he can say that and get away with it because he's never going to come in and debate in this arena. He won't be under pressure to do it. And whoever does have to do it in the future, it won't be him. So he can make that claim all day long, and he doesn't have to back it up because he just knows people will just accept it from him. And it doesn't matter in 10 years down the line when someone else that's an astrophysicist or something has to publicly deal with us because he won't be the one that does it. Because at that stage, he'll be retired and on his business or whatever, but he won't be doing it.
You would think somebody would call him out, right? Like where are the football coaches on this? All the people that would listen to this and say, hey, wait a minute. If Neil deGrasse could just watch a game and calculate how the Earth rotated underneath the ball so that
Yeah,
he
right.
could score the field goal. How can I? Why is this not in the playbook?
Why isn't it in the bookies? Why haven't the bookies
Hello?
got it in the stats? Why haven't the people who gamble on it got, well, this particular stadium's pointing this direction. So I say it
Yes.
favours them in field goals. Therefore, statistically, Earth turning underneath this stadium is going to give this team a more likely win. Never going to be
Exactly.
calculated, never going to be part of the stats, never going to be gambled on, never going to be used to predict who's going to win, because it doesn't happen.
How could we get him out into the arena? There's got to be a way. Maybe if we call him a scaredy cat, scaredy cat, scaredy cat.
Neil deGrasse Tyson's job is to sit in front of a pretty interviewer, make an assertion that's in line with the rhetoric, and have the interviewer fawn over his declaration. Absolutely not his position to come to trench level and say, Earth turned underneath a football for it to cause not actual deflection from the stands and seem to drift through the goal. You go, well, if Earth is turning under a ball, then it's turning under a plane, Mr. Tyson. What's he going to do then? Relinquish his ball belief? Say his calculations are wrong? Say his tweet was incorrect? He's not going to be able to do any of those things. You would have to accept the logical consistency that is, if Earth has Coriolis, Earth has Coriolis, which is all we really argue about here. We've got it in our proof top 3 for why Earth isn't spinning. Coriolis effect. We'd have some. Well, it's also in their list of proofsies, isn't it? Therefore, you can't have Neil deGrasse Tyson coming to us when we use Coriolis to debunk the claim Earth's turning, when he's claiming it's a proofsy with a football.
Yeah, why would he come here when he can stay in Hollywood, be in movies, get all kinds of notoriety, do interviews, hang around with famous people? Why would he come here to have his whole world destroyed? Which one would happen? Because he wouldn't be able to back his claims.
It
Exactly.
will only make the general public aware of the trenchers, which is big trouble because trenchers constantly contradict the mainstream narrative. So
Our lot in life is not to deal with Neil deGrasse Tyson. Our lot in life is to deal with nameless, faceless trolls who tell us that we don't understand what Neil deGrasse Tyson's actually saying, and then reword what he said into, there won't ever be drift, we wouldn't expect to see it, now you, flat earther, prove reference frames that you're claiming. That's what they need, not Neil deGrasse Tyson. If Neil deGrasse Tyson came here and said, you need to prove that we've got Earth turning underneath stuff, you and your reference frames are ruined, which is the kind of argument we get, demanded that we prove their claim as a burden of proof reversal fallacy when we're debunking it. Imagine Neil deGrasse Tyson saying, how dare you claim Earth turns underneath stuff? And you go, that's Coriolis effect. Would you like me to detail what Coriolis effect is? Here's several citations that show you and detail with visual examples of how it works. And you're claiming that's what the ball did. You're claiming non-inertial turning reference frame under the ball to cause not actual deflection. That is your claim. That's what Coriolis is. Therefore, flights would be reduced in their duration, Mr. Tyson. Where's he going to go?
well, he's gonna have to realize lockstep theory at some point.
What, crapping in the face of his claim that the ball drifted? So he's saying, the ball drifted because we had a not actual deflection caused by Earth's rotation. That's his claim. Well, what, simultaneously, the ball didn't deflect through the goal because Earth and atmosphere move as one in violation of the first law of thermodynamics. You think he can hold both positions and not seem like a complete cretin?
He could abandon
On the screen, we could have his tweet while he's saying that.
he could abandon his old position and just say, yeah, I've looked deeper into it, and there's actually an alternative explanation.
No, he can't. He's a priest. He can't deviate from the rhetoric. Now, the people at trench level can easily demonstrate their cognitive dissonance and will, by way of defending their own pain, try and explain their cognitive dissonance, hold both positions simultaneously. But who's doing it? I asked one guy what his name was. He refused to give it me. These people are totally nameless and faceless when they express their cognitive dissonance here. Neil deGrasse Tyson needs to seem united in his absolute certitude of what he is claiming. Not say, well, actually, I might be wrong that the ball drifted through because of Earth's rotation. Well, it could be that Earth's rotation wouldn't be noticeable because nothing's drifting. It's all travelling at the same rate as the air that's moving in violation of the first law. It would piss in the face of his own claim, Arwin. which wouldn't make him seem very believable now, would it? Doesn't matter if Joe Public does that, though.
Okay, you got a point there. It is in a way almost meant to trigger people justifying it. It is
want to
it's
trigger the
part of that design.
I want to trigger the football coaches. Like,
wanna
hello, why is this not in the playbook that you could just figure out how the Earth's rotation will help you win the game? Why are people winning Super Bowls without this?
Exactly. I want to appeal to the bookies with exactly the same appeal. Why aren't the bookies calculating which direction the stadium's going to benefit whichever team?
Yeah, man. Get on this.
Don't they already do that with the sunlight?
Well,
Pretty much.
exactly. So something plausible. Well, the sun will get in the players' eyes because they're playing at 3 p.m. and this particular stadium's facing east. So therefore, if they're pointing at that goal, they're going to have the sun in their eyes. And you go, that's something plausible that might throw the game one way or the other. However, literally something turning underneath as the ball moves. Well, we don't need to concern ourselves with that. But Neil deGrasse Tyson will tweet out how it affected the game.
Exactly.
Like, literally, he claimed that the game was only won because of that effect, right? It was so influential, it swayed the game. According to him.
Like the big golf guys, like Tiger Woods, are they getting like hole in ones, and from how far away are they getting that? Did they calculate which way the Earth was spinning? I mean, come on, man, that's not
a good point. The golf ball's in the air a lot longer than a sniper's bullet.
Exactly. Oh,
if
man,
you're in a
it's
war
so sad.
and one person, when one army is dealing with the Coriolis and the other army's not, somebody's getting slayed.
Yeah, the one that ignores Coriolis is most likely going to win.
Exactly.
Because it doesn't happen.
It makes no sense, though, because if the Coriolis effect was present due to the Earth spinning underneath and everything would be deviating, then even before the people would accept that the Earth might be a ball spinning underneath, there would be a general in the field knowledge. It's like, oh yeah, when you're facing that direction and you can recognize it by where the sun is at in day, you're going to have to aim slightly to the right every time. We don't know why, but you have to or you're going to miss.
Yeah,
Right?
they'll keep missing and saying, we're not
agree with that.
calculating right. We're not calculating right. We're losing men by the thousands.
And then the moment humans put vehicles in the air, it would have been really evident. Okay. We can notice that with a bullet. As soon as people started flying 3,000, 4,000 miles away, I think that would have been evident. And it's not. And that's not our fault. So don't come in here and tell us, why would we expect to see it? Well, that's your side that says we expect to see it. It's not us.
Any comments from Discord? Anyone want to comment on
I don't
this?
understand why not any type of rifle ever designed. Why it doesn't have like a standard in the crosshair systems of guns? Why it doesn't have a special Coriolis indicator, as a standard issue with every single weapon ever?
Because good question. Because it's a not actual effect, Arwin.
Generals and commanders in the battlefield have always had 2 points that they go with. Take the high ground and put the sun in the face of the enemy. That's it. No Coriolis.
Sorry, I covered this earlier, though, Arwin. Yes, you're right, 10th man. But when I said, with the example of Neil under the roundabout, does the plane, likewise with your example or in line with your example, does the plane get a radio command to adjust their course because Neil is underneath them on a roundabout, seeing them seem to turn around? Do they need to worry about that? Obviously not, because it's a not actual deflection, and the actual trajectory of the plane in this example has nothing to do with the effect of Coriolis. So you're never going to have a Coriolis meter on anything.
No, an indicator that helps the person using the aiming device.
Let me try once more.
To remember that there is.
I heard. So try once more. So on the plane in my example, Neil's underneath it, looks up and sees the plane look like it's turning around because he's on a roundabout. Does the plane have a Coriolis indicator that tells the pilot by a little gauge, check it out, somebody's watching you from a non-inertial spinning reference frame, seem to turn around? Does the plane have an indicator for that, Arwin?
Yes, a special red flickering
No.
terminal. No, it doesn't. Right.
You don't need
It'll be
indication for
fun-
not
it'll
actual
be
deflection.
fun though when that plane tries to land and it's gonna have to negotiate a moving runway. That'll be fun.
Or when it can't keep up with the turn of the Earth on the equator and is actually flying backwards in relation to the location it's travelling to. That would be a problem too. Doesn't happen because Earth's not turning underneath anything.
Indeed.
I just say to Neil, if someone ever tells you Neil deGrasse Tyson's an idiot, just say welcome to Flat Earth, because that's what we say.
Highly skilled magician, I'll have you know. Check out the waistcoat.
Yep.
I kind of like Neil. I think he's a fun guy, and that's probably his only redeeming quality.
The magician.
Because other than that, he's just spouting bullshit all the time. so-
Bullshit. He's a magician. That's what magic is. You know, words. It's just that's what he's doing. He's casting spells when he talks about things, and the spell is never going to have the contradictory, cognitive dissonance laden rhetoric from the trench involved in any way, shape, or form. So Neil deGrasse Tyson's never going to be asserting Earth and atmosphere travel as one, no deviation, because that's not the globe rhetoric. The globe rhetoric is Coriolis effect, and that's what he will punt. He definitely doesn't need challenging it from us because it would leave him looking incredibly stupid. Because here we spend most of the time trying to convince our opponent what they actually claim. You're claiming Earth turns under the pendulum. Often we spend so much time explaining to them what they're actually claiming. They think we're claiming it, and we get people like Simon Dan saying you and your reference frames are ruined, thinking I've got reference frames to claim, because we spend so much time explaining to them what their claim actually involves. Your claim involves Earth turning underneath stuff. And they don't think it does because it doesn't happen. They can't believe that that's the actual claim. Because all they've heard is Coriolis effect, Google searched it and found a load of complicated descriptions that involve Earth, or involve clouds, or involve something else that's nothing to do with not actual deflection observed from a non-inertial turning reference frame. So they can't believe it when you lay it out for them that Earth should be turning underneath stuff to have this effect. So much so that they know instinctively it doesn't happen, and go, no, you prove to me that that's what we're claiming. With that, I'm going to say a huge, massive, enormous thank you to, first and foremost, all of you tuned in live. But if you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley premiering streams, then stay tuned, as there will be an after show to follow. Also, below this video, there is a link to get £50 for swapping your UK electricity supplier to Octopus Energy. Once again, stay tuned if you're watching on either premiering stream. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I'll see you all in the next video.
What a lovely day!